At 2:17 a.m., the forest went quiet in a way that trained soldiers notice instantly. Not peaceful, empty. The NATO sniper lay prone on a frozen ridge in Eastern Europe, his breath measured, rifle steady, scope trained on a dark corridor between trees that intelligence had flagged as inactive. No movement, no heat signatures, no radio chatter. Then the sky blinked. Not a flare, not lightning. A precise, colorless pulse, too controlled, too clean, hovered just above the tree line. The sniper adjusted his scope, heart rate still calm, muscle memory intact. The object did not emit heat. It did not reflect light the way metal should. It absorbed it. Command whispered through the earpiece, "Hold fire." The object moved anyway. It didn't fly forward, it folded the distance. The sniper did what he had been trained to do for 14 years. He fired one round. The shot never landed. The bullet vanished mid-air, as if swallowed by a ripple no camera would later admit existed. The forest erupted into static. Night vision feeds cut to snow. Radios screamed and then went dead. And the sniper, one of NATO's most disciplined marksmen, was lifted off the ground without a sound. No struggle, no scream, no impact, just absence. Within minutes, the operation was classified above top secret. Within hours, NATO denied the mission existed. By morning, the sniper's name was removed from rosters, files locked, family informed of a training accident with no body to return. But something went wrong. Because 3 nights later, a NATO satellite detected a brief signal pulse, origin unknown, using the sniper's biometric signature, and whatever took him had learned how to send something back. Before we go any further, subscribe to the channel if you want stories the reports never explain, and comment where you're watching from. These stories surface differently depending on who's listening, because this one doesn't ask whether UFOs exist. It asks what happens after you shoot at one. Officially, this incident never happened. There is no mission log acknowledging a NATO sniper operating alone near the eastern border that night. No after-action report mentions an unidentified aerial phenomenon. No briefing slide admits that a trained marksman discharged a weapon at a target command could not classify. Yet fragments exist. Satellite anomalies recorded within a 10-second window. Encrypted radio traffic flagged and then overwritten. A sudden personnel gap in a unit roster that never received a replacement. And a family given a folded flag without a body, without coordinates, without answers. What makes this case different isn't the disappearance, it's the response. Within hours, Allied commands activated protocols normally reserved for nuclear incidents, information compartmentalized, cross-agency silence enforced, analysts reassigned mid-shift. Intelligence officers were ordered not to investigate the object, but the reaction to it. The focus wasn't on what appeared in the sky. It was on what the sniper did. He fired. That single decision triggered a level of containment usually associated with international escalation. Not because of damage, not because of casualties, because contact had occurred. In this story, we're not dealing with speculation pulled from internet forums or recycled rumors. We're following a chain of reactions, military, bureaucratic, and psychological, that only happens when something breaks expectations at the highest level. Over the next chapters, we'll trace the sniper's last confirmed movements, the classified briefings that followed, and the quiet signals that suggested he didn't simply vanish. We'll examine why NATO changed patrol behavior in the region for months afterward, why Allied forces updated engagement rules without public explanation, and why a single biometric ping caused a multi-nation emergency meeting behind closed doors. And most importantly, we'll ask the question no official document dares to phrase: if the sniper was taken, why did something later try to answer for him? If you haven't yet, subscribe so you don't miss how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. Stories like this don't stay hidden forever. They surface when enough people are paying attention. Now, this is where it truly begins. The sniper's call sign was removed from records within 6 hours. Not reassigned, not marked KIA, removed. As if the man had never completed selection, never passed sniper school, never spent years training to stay invisible in places most people never knew existed. Before that erasure, however, there was a window, short, fragmented and heavily redacted, where traces of him still lived inside systems designed to remember everything. He had been deployed as part of a NATO rotational presence near a border region that officially required monitoring, not engagement. The terrain was dense forest broken by abandoned agricultural structures and narrow ridgelines left over from Cold War mapping. No active combat zone, no insurgency, no reason for a sniper team, on paper. Unofficially, Allied intelligence had logged repeated aerial anomalies in the area for months. Not drones, not satellites. Objects that appeared briefly on radar, then vanished without leaving electronic residue. Pilots had been warned not to pursue. Ground units were told to log, not react. The sniper was there to observe patterns. His thermal scope footage, later confiscated but partially reconstructed, showed nothing abnormal until 02:16 a.m. That's when the ambient temperature in his field of view dropped suddenly, not across the environment, but in a defined vertical column approximately 20 meters wide. That didn't match weather behavior. He adjusted magnification. The trees within the column appeared compressed, their outlines subtly misaligned, as if depth perception itself had been folded. There was no sound, no wind, no electromagnetic interference registered on his secondary instruments. Then came the light, not illumination, presence. The object didn't descend, it didn't approach. It simply manifested at a fixed distance above the tree line, hovering in a way that didn't displace air or cast shadow the way conventional physics would demand. The sniper requested clarification from command. His transmission reached them, but their response arrived late, distorted, stretched as if the signal itself had traveled through something dense. Hold fire. The object rotated. That was the word used in the sniper's final verbal report before silence. Rotated. Not turned, not shifted. Rotated along an axis that didn't align with gravity or orientation. His scope recorded the movement at 30 frames per second. Each frame showed the same impossible absence of detail. No seams, no surface texture, no reflection. He fired anyway. Later, analysis confirmed the bullet didn't deflect, it didn't explode, it didn't ricochet. The round ceased to exist at a precise point 1.4 meters from the object's surface. In that same instant, every sensor tied to the sniper's position flatlined. The team stationed 5 kilometers away reported a sudden pressure drop, followed by a wave of static that rolled through their equipment like a pulse. Night vision devices went white. Compasses spun. A satellite pass overhead logged a microburst of energy that didn't match known signatures. And the sniper, who had been prone, concealed, anchored to the terrain, was gone. No drag marks, no disturbed foliage, no thermal trace of a body moving away, just a shallow indentation in frozen soil, as if something had lifted him straight upward without resistance. Within 30 minutes, the area was sealed. Within 90, a joint task group assumed control. By sunrise, the official explanation had already been written, but internally, panic spread. Not fear, violation, because this wasn't the first time a soldier had disappeared in proximity to unexplained aerial phenomena. It was the first time one had fired and triggered a reaction. In the days that followed, analysts reviewed every piece of data frame by frame, the scope footage, the satellite logs, the radio distortions. One analyst noted something that would later be scrubbed from the final internal summary. At the exact moment, the bullet vanished. The sniper's biometric feed spiked, not in stress, not in panic, but in neural synchronization. His brain activity briefly aligned in a pattern consistent with deep REM sleep. He wasn't fighting, he wasn't screaming. For less than a second, he appeared to be listening. This detail unsettled command more than the disappearance itself. Listening implied communication. 3 days later, NATO quietly updated engagement protocols across multiple regions. Snipers and reconnaissance units were instructed to disengage immediately if encountering non-responsive aerial anomalies. The wording was vague, intentionally so. Then came the signal. At 03:41 a.m., a NATO satellite registered a burst transmission lasting 0.8 seconds. The signal wasn't language, it wasn't imagery. It was a compressed data packet keyed to a biometric encryption pattern. The sniper's, not his equipment, not his call sign, his body, heart rhythm, neural cadence, respiratory timing, as if something had learned how to mimic him. The packet contained a single anomaly, a distortion consistent with speech attempting to pass through an incompatible medium. Engineers couldn't decode it, but they could confirm one thing. The signal originated above the atmosphere, then refracted downward, aimed, not broadcast. Someone or something had tried to send him back. That attempt triggered an emergency session among NATO defense ministers. No notes were released. No press statement followed, but orbital monitoring increased globally for the next 48 hours, and the sniper's family received a call. They were told he died during a classified training exercise. They were given no location, no body, and no timeline. The widow asked if he suffered. The officer on the line paused before answering. "No," he said, "not in the way we understand it." What no one told the family, and what only a handful of analysts would ever know, was that somewhere beyond classified airspace, something had acknowledged being shot at, and it had not responded with force. It responded with curiosity. Two things happened after the biometric ping. First, NATO stopped treating the event like an anomaly. Second, someone high enough to outrank paranoia decided to treat it like a door. The sniper's disappearance had triggered a containment response. Erase, deny, suppress. But the signal changed the shape of the problem. You can bury a missing soldier under secrecy. You can't bury a message that proves something out there can reach back. So they did what militaries always do when something violates their world. They built a plan that looked like control. A controlled contact attempt. It was never called that on paper. The language used was safer. Environmental verification, signal integrity testing, orbital interference assessment. But the internal intent was blunt. If something could send a packet keyed to human biometrics, then it could potentially receive one. And if it could receive, it could be provoked. A small cell was formed inside the Joint Task Group. Signals officers, aerospace engineers, electronic warfare specialists, and one intelligence psychologist whose job was to anticipate non-human pattern logic without saying the words non-human out loud. Their first decision was the smartest and the most dangerous. Don't chase the object, invite it. They selected a second location within the same region, chosen for its repeatable conditions. Low civilian presence, clear sky corridors, and a ridgeline similar to the sniper's last position. A decoy team was staged with long-range optics, thermal imaging, and a controlled spectrum transmitter capable of producing bursts across multiple bands. The decoy team included a sniper, not because they needed a shooter, because they needed a signature. They placed him prone at 02 a.m., precisely aligned to match the last known posture and orientation of the missing NATO marksman. They even replicated the same weapon system, not loaded but present, because the event seemed triggered by recognition and escalation. Then they waited. The forest did what forests do at night, creaked, cracked, breathed. At 02:14 a.m., nothing happened. At 02:16 a.m., the air changed. Not a gust, not fog. The temperature in the ridge corridor dropped again, cleanly, as if something had drawn a ruler through the atmosphere. The decoy sniper reported the sensation first, a pressure behind the eyes, like altitude sickness without the altitude. Seconds later, every digital system in the staging zone registered a micro-flicker. Power wasn't cut, but timing was altered. The engineers described it later as if the clocks inside their devices briefly disagreed on what "now" meant. Then the object appeared. Same position above the tree line, same absence of heat, same refusal to behave like a manufactured thing. The difference this time, it arrived already facing them. The intelligence psychologist, Dr. Keene, watched the live feed and whispered a sentence that made the room go cold. It remembers. Command issued a single instruction over secure comms. No fire, no movement, no escalation. The decoy sniper held. Then NATO initiated the transmission. They didn't send language. Language assumes shared reference. They sent structure. A compressed burst built from the missing sniper's biometric encryption pattern, recreated using archived training telemetry. Heart rhythm variability, respiration cadence, and neural timing derived from standard NATO wearable signatures. It wasn't a perfect match, but it was close enough to test a hypothesis. Would the object respond to the pattern the way it had responded to the bullet? The burst lasted 0.8 seconds. The object reacted instantly, not by moving, by changing the air around it. The imaging feed distorted as if the camera lens had been dipped into water. Trees bent at impossible angles. The object's outline thickened, then thinned, like it was testing which shape fit reality best. Then the decoy sniper, trained, disciplined, steady, whispered into his mic, "It's in my head." Command snapped, "Describe." He didn't answer at first. His breathing slowed, too slow. Dr. Keene leaned closer to her monitor. "He's dissociating," she said. "Pull him out." But before they could, the decoy sniper spoke again, voice flat, almost rehearsed. "It's asking me to repeat the number." "What number?" Command demanded. The decoy sniper's eyes didn't blink. "The one I think I am." The engineers in the command van froze. That wasn't a hallucination. That was a concept. Identity as a number. NATO scrambled for an explanation. Drug exposure, stress, psychological break. But Dr. Keene shut it down with one line. Something is probing his self-concept. And then the object did something no one expected. It emitted a sound, not loud, not mechanical, a low oscillation that didn't vibrate the air as much as it vibrated attention. Every person in the van felt it behind their teeth, in the bones of the jaw. The decoy sniper's wearable captured his heart rate, dropping into a calm that didn't match fear. He sounded relieved. "Stop transmission," Command ordered. The engineers cut the signal immediately. The object remained. Then it projected a second burst downward, shorter than the first, sharper, with a signature that made the analysts' faces drain, because it matched the missing sniper's biometric key with near-perfect fidelity. Too perfect to be an accident. "Doctor," Keene whispered, "it's wearing him." The object held position for 11 seconds. In those 11 seconds, every camera feed recorded a faint, human-shaped distortion beneath the object, like a silhouette pressed against glass from the other side. No details, no face, just the undeniable geometry of a body. Then the silhouette flickered, and the object vanished. Not out of frame, out of existence. The temperature column dissipated. The forest returned. Systems stabilized as if nothing had happened, but the command van stayed silent because the implication was unbearable. The missing sniper was not just gone. He was present somewhere, and something had learned how to use him as a key. Back at the secure facility, NATO convened a classified briefing with only a handful of attendees cleared above national boundaries. The briefing didn't ask what the object was. It asked a more operational question: why take the sniper at all? The answer emerged from pattern analysis. The missing sniper was not random. He had a particular training profile: exceptional shot discipline, low emotional volatility, high cognitive control, a mind that could hold still under pressure, a mind useful for calibration. Dr. Keene summarized it in language the room couldn't ignore. "It didn't take him because he fired," she said. "It took him because he was capable of being processed." The room went colder. An admiral asked the question no one wanted to hear. "Processed into what?" Dr. Keene didn't blink. "An interface," she said, "a translator, a handle." And that meant NATO had a choice: do nothing and accept they'd lost him forever, or escalate carefully and risk turning the next soldier into another key. Because now it wasn't just a mystery over a forest, it was a negotiation. And the thing in the sky had made one point perfectly clear: it could take a man without a sound and still return his outline as a warning. The second story NATO told the family was cleaner than the first. The first explanation, training accident, had been vague, almost insulting in its emptiness. The second came with ceremony: a uniformed officer, a folded flag, carefully rehearsed condolences delivered with the precision of a drill. The sniper's wife noticed the difference immediately. In the first call, they sounded uncertain. In the second, they sounded instructed. "He died during a classified reconnaissance operation," the officer said, standing in her living room as if the space itself were under review. There was no suffering. She didn't cry. Not yet. She asked one question instead. "Where is he?" The officer's jaw tightened just enough to register. "There was no recoverable body." She nodded slowly. "So he's missing?" "No," the officer replied too quickly. "He's deceased." She looked at the folded flag in his hands. "Then why does it feel like you're still looking for him?" The officer didn't answer. What she didn't know, and what NATO would never admit, was that the decision to visit her home had nothing to do with compassion. It had to do with timing, because less than 6 hours earlier, something had been found, not at the original site, not near the ridge. 50 kilometers east, in a shallow clearing where no patrol had ever been scheduled, a NATO rapid response unit operating under a silent retrieval order had detected a localized electromagnetic irregularity during a routine sweep. The anomaly was weak, decaying like an echo fading after impact, but within it was an object, half buried in frozen soil, a piece of equipment, the sniper's rifle sling. It was unmistakable, serial-matched fiber composition unique to his loadout, and embedded with trace residues that shouldn't have existed together: ozone scoring, ionized mineral dust, and microscopic fractures along the metal clasp that suggested extreme pressure applied from multiple directions at once. The retrieval team didn't touch it at first. They circled the clearing, instruments humming softly, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did, which frightened them more. They sealed the sling inside a Faraday container and airlifted it to a secure analysis facility before dawn. No photos leaked. No logs were shared outside the compartment, but the scientists who examined it would later agree on one thing: the sling had not been torn, burned, or broken. It had been stretched, not physically, dimensionally, as if it had been pulled through a space that didn't fully agree with the idea of length. When Dr. Keene was shown the preliminary analysis, she didn't hesitate. "This isn't debris," she said. "It's evidence of transit." Transit implied intention, which meant the sniper hadn't been taken randomly, violently, or carelessly. He had been relocated. That realization triggered the next phase. NATO didn't announce it. They didn't document it under a single operation name. Instead, a series of orders went out across departments that looked unrelated unless viewed together: silent orbital adjustments, limited airspace closures under weather pretenses, reassignment of linguists and cognitive specialists to non-traditional threat modeling. And then there was the retrieval team, hand-picked, not soldiers known for aggression but for restraint. men and women trained to enter unstable environments and leave without leaving signatures. Their instructions were blunt in a way NATO rarely allows on paper. If contact occurs, do not pursue. If communication occurs, do not respond verbally. If a human silhouette appears, disengage immediately. One team member asked the obvious question, "What if it's him?" The commander answered without emotion, "Then it's already too late." They returned to the original ridge under cover of a joint exercise. The forest looked the same, uninterested, indifferent. Snow had covered the shallow indentation where the sniper vanished, but the instruments didn't lie. Residual distortions lingered. Dr. Keane stood behind the team, watching readouts with narrowed eyes. "This area isn't empty," she said. "It's thin." The team advanced slowly. At 02:17 a.m., the exact time of the original incident, the sensors spiked again. Not a full manifestation, just a pressure, like standing near something large behind a wall. The team halted. And then, without warning, one of the members, a communications specialist named Rusk, froze mid-step. His voice came through the comms, calm and distant. "Sir," he said, "I'm hearing someone count." The commander snapped, "Rusk, disengage." Rusk didn't move. "It's not sound," Rusk continued. "It's structure, like numbers stacked inside my head." Dr. Keane whispered, "Pull him out, now!" Two soldiers grabbed Rusk and dragged him backward. The moment his boots crossed the perimeter threshold, the pressure collapsed. The forest exhaled. Rusk fell to his knees, gasping, not in panic, but confusion. "I wasn't scared," he said. "That's the problem." The retrieval team aborted the mission immediately. Back at the facility, Dr. Keane reviewed Rusk's neural telemetry and felt her stomach drop. The pattern matched, not perfectly, but close. Close enough to suggest that whatever had taken the sniper was no longer just using him as a template. It was learning, and learning fast. Meanwhile, the sniper's wife sat alone in her kitchen, staring at the folded flag she hadn't yet touched. Her phone buzzed. A blocked number. She almost ignored it. Almost. When she answered, there was silence for a moment. Then a sound she recognized in her bones. Breathing, measured, familiar, not distorted, not panicked, just present. "Hello?" she whispered. The line crackled softly. Then a voice, faint, strained, layered with something else, spoke one word, her name. The call ended. NATO never intercepted it. No trace, no log, no explanation. But from that moment on, one thing became undeniable. The sniper wasn't gone. He wasn't free. And whatever had taken him was no longer satisfied with observation. It was reaching toward the only place it knew how to aim, home. The sniper's wife didn't tell anyone about the call for 12 minutes. That's how long it took her to stop staring at the phone like it might ring again and confirm she wasn't losing her mind. In those 12 minutes, she replayed the sound of the breathing over and over, measuring it against memory, because spouses don't recognize a voice first. They recognize rhythm, the way someone inhales when they're about to speak, the tiny pause they take before saying a name, the quiet wait behind familiar silence. Then the voice, broken, layered, wrong, said her name, and the line went dead. When she finally called the liaison officer back, her voice didn't shake. "I got a call," she said. "From him." The officer asked her to repeat it. She did. He didn't say, "That's impossible." He didn't say, "You're in shock." He simply said, "Stay where you are. Do not discuss this with anyone." Then he ended the call. Within 20 minutes, the containment machine switched on. Not loudly, not with sirens, with procedures. Her internet dropped for exactly 9 minutes and came back. A neighbor's car that normally parked across the street didn't show up that evening. A utility worker appeared the next morning to inspect the line without touching a single tool. She wasn't being protected. She was being managed. At the secure facility, the report hit Dr. Keane's desk like a live wire. A civilian received a voice contact keyed to the missing sniper, the intel officer said, choosing his words carefully, as if language itself could escalate the event. Dr. Keen's eyes narrowed. "And you're sure it's not a spoof?" The officer slid a file toward her. "The call didn't route through a carrier network. It appeared and disappeared. No traceable origin, no tower handshake. It's as if the phone became an endpoint for something else." Dr. Keen didn't blink. "Then it wasn't a call." The room stayed silent. "It was a delivery," she finished. Command convened a closed briefing with representatives from multiple Allied agencies. No flags on the table, no ceremonial rank acknowledgements, just hard faces and the shared understanding that one wrong move could make the situation irreversible. The debate split instantly into two camps. Camp 1. Contain the wife. Treat the contact as hostile psychological warfare. Suppress everything. Camp 2. Use the wife as a channel. If the sniper could speak through whatever medium held him, then perhaps he could be guided. A general spoke first. "We cannot allow an unknown actor to establish direct contact with civilian infrastructure." A signals director countered. "We can't stop it if we don't understand it." An admiral asked the question no one wanted to answer. What if the sniper isn't contacting her? What if something is using him to learn how we respond? "Doctor." Keen finally spoke, voice calm but edged. "Both can be true," she said. "He can be trying, and it can be learning through him." The room tightened. An intelligence officer slid forward a second report. "We have a new biometric ping," he said. "Not orbital this time, atmospheric." Dr. Keen leaned in. "Location?" "Near the original ridge, but displaced. Like it moved laterally without traveling." Command authorized a silent deployment, a retrieval team, an electronic warfare unit, and a containment psychologist. No loud equipment, no drones, no lights. If the object remembered, they wanted to reduce anything it could interpret as aggression. They arrived at the ridge at 2:05 a.m., early enough to settle, late enough to intersect the time window. The forest was cold and still, the kind of stillness that makes your ears search for sound and find nothing. Snow muffled footfalls. Even breathing felt loud. At 02:16 a.m., the pressure returned. Not a gust, not a vibration, a sensation like stepping into an elevator that's already moving. One team member whispered, "My teeth feel wrong." Another said, "My watch is lagging." The electronic warfare operator checked his screen and cursed softly. "Clocks are desynchronizing again." Then the decoy transmitter activated, minimal output, just enough to send structure without invitation. A biometric keyed pulse, identical length to the earlier attempt, seeded with a simple pattern. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. A knock, no language, just intent. The forest didn't respond with sound. It responded with alignment. Thermal imaging flickered, not from interference but from an impossible stillness in the air column ahead. Trees within the corridor bent subtly, not from wind but from a perspective error, as if distance itself had been edited. Then a silhouette appeared, not the object above the tree line this time. A human-shaped distortion at ground level several meters into the corridor, like a person standing behind rippling glass. No details, no face. But the geometry was unmistakable. Shoulders, head, arms held close, posture slightly forward, as if bracing. Every soldier on the team felt the instinct to move toward it. Dr. Keen's voice cut through their earpieces. "Do not approach." The commander raised his hand. Everyone froze. The silhouette twitched. The comms operator's headset crackled, and a voice slipped through. Thin, strained, layered with static that sounded less like noise and more like something pressing against a wall. "Don't..." The commander's eyes widened. "Identify yourself." "Doctor." Keen snapped, "No verbal response!" But it was too late. Words had entered the space. The silhouette convulsed, as if the sound of the commander's voice had tugged on it like a hook. Then the voice returned, clearer for half a second, terrifying precisely because it sounded human. "Don't follow light." The comms operator stared at his screen. "That's him," he whispered. "The cadence matches his training audio." Dr. Keen's jaw tightened. "He's riding the channel." The silhouette's outline sharpened briefly, enough for a detail to slip through. A hand raised, fingers splayed, palm outward. Stop. Then the corridor shifted. Not physically, relationally. The trees didn't move, but the space between them did. Depth collapsed and expanded, like the forest couldn't decide where it was. Two soldiers stumbled, catching themselves, eyes wide. The commander barked, "Disengage! Now!" They backed away slowly, disciplined, refusing to turn their backs. The silhouette jerked again, and the voice returned, this time not pleading, but urgent in a way that made the commander's skin crawl. "It's using me." The sentence broke apart, distorted, then returned in fragments. "Not me anymore." Then the pressure spiked like a wave slamming into the ridge. Every device in the team's kit glitched at once. Night vision flared white. Radios screamed. The electronic warfare operator ripped his headset off, shouting that the sound felt like it was inside his skull. And then the silhouette was gone, not fading, cut, as if a switch had been flipped. The forest returned instantly. Normal cold, normal silence, normal physics. The team stumbled backward, hearts pounding, lungs burning, the kind of fear that doesn't come from bullets. It comes from realizing you are not the only intelligence in the room. Back at the facility, the commander demanded permission to return. "We had him," he argued. "We had contact." Dr. Keen didn't look impressed. "You didn't have him," she said. "You had a moment where it let you think you did." Command asked the question that now mattered more than extraction. What was he trying to warn us about? Dr. Keen replayed the audio, isolating the fragments, her eyes fixed on the waveform. "Don't follow light," she repeated. "That's not coordinates. That's instruction." The room went quiet, because they all understood what it implied. The object wasn't just taking people, it was shaping behavior, luring units into predictable patterns, training them. And now the sniper, if he was still himself at all, had done the only thing left he could do. He tried to keep them from making the same mistake that got him taken. And somewhere far from the ridge, in a quiet kitchen under invisible surveillance, his wife stared at her phone again, not hoping it would ring, fearing that next time it wouldn't be her name it used. NATO changed the rules of engagement in a single night. Not publicly, not with a press conference, with a memo that never left a sealed network and never used the words UFO or non-human. It was titled Revised Protocol for Unidentified Aerial Environmental Anomalies. The language was clinical, but the intent was unmistakable. Do not engage. Do not illuminate with lasers. Do not attempt pursuit. Do not transmit verbal responses if anomalous communication begins. If personnel report cognitive intrusion, immediate extraction is mandatory. If a light lure is observed, disengage and retreat to hard cover. Light lure. That phrase, awkward, unmilitary, was the closest thing to an admission that someone inside NATO had decided the sniper's warning was real. Because they weren't just worried about losing another soldier. They were worried about predictable behavior. If the unknown could influence attention, it could influence movement. If it could influence movement, it could shape the battlefield without firing a shot. And that meant every trained instinct, every reflex soldiers relied on, could become a liability. While commanders argued about strategy, another process moved faster: containment of the wife. It was framed as protection. It always is. 2 days after the call, a black vehicle arrived outside her home at dawn. No siren, no lights. 2 people in plain clothes, professional faces, soft voices. "Ma'am," the man said, "we need to relocate you temporarily." She didn't ask who sent them. She already knew. She asked the only question that mattered. "Is he alive?" The woman in plain clothes didn't answer directly. We believe you experienced contact. That makes you vulnerable." The wife stepped back. "Vulnerable to what?" The man's expression tightened. "To follow-up contact." She stared at them, voice steady. "So you think it will call again?" The woman said carefully. "We can't rule it out." The wife glanced down at the folded flag on her shelf, still untouched. "You gave me that," she said, "and now you're moving me like evidence." No one contradicted her. She packed quickly, clothes, documents, a small photo of her husband taken years earlier, before the world learned how to erase men, before silence became policy. As the vehicle drove away, she watched her neighborhood recede and realized something colder than fear. If the unknown could reach her phone, it could reach her anywhere. Relocation didn't protect her from it. It protected NATO from what she might become, a civilian witness who refused to be quiet. At the secure facility where she was placed, clean walls, no windows that opened, polite staff who asked too many questions, she was told to surrender her devices. She refused. A man in a suit appeared later, speaking softly like a counselor. "We're not taking them away," he said. "We're securing them." She held her phone tighter. "Then secure it in my hand." The man paused. "Ma'am?" She cut him off. "If he calls again, I'm answering." The suit's voice cooled slightly. "You could be manipulated." Her eyes narrowed. "I was married to him. I'm not going to ignore his voice because you're afraid of what it means." That refusal triggered something behind the scenes, a decision that containment alone wasn't enough. NATO needed a way to predict the next attempt. Dr. Keen's team went back through the data and found a pattern that had been missed under stress. The unknown did not select targets at random. It selected profiles. The missing sniper had a rare combination: low baseline anxiety, high cognitive control, and unusual biometric consistency. His heart rhythms were stable even under extreme pressure. His neural telemetry showed minimal noise, which meant his internal signal was clean. Clean signals are easier to map, easier to mimic, easier to use as keys. Dr. Keen summarized it in one sentence that no one liked hearing: "It's picking minds it can hold." So NATO quietly ran a search. They looked for personnel with matching biometric patterns, soldiers whose bodies moved through stress without spiking, people with training, discipline, and the wrong kind of calm. The search returned 3 names across 2 nations. One was an intelligence analyst stationed far from the forest. One was a drone operator. The third was a young NATO sniper in training whose physiology mirrored the missing marksman's in an unsettling way. The command group debated whether to pull them all from duty. A general insisted, "If we pull them, we confirm we believe the threat." Dr. Keen countered, "If we leave them, we feed it." They compromised in the most dangerous way possible. They created a decoy, not in the forest, in a place no one expected, a controlled base environment designed to trigger the same recognition response without the terrain variable. The decoy was the young sniper in training, call sign Larch. They didn't tell him the real reason. They couldn't. Knowledge itself seemed to matter. They told him he was participating in a classified assessment involving advanced electronic warfare simulations. Larch believed them. At 01:58 a.m., Larch was placed alone in a small observation bunker on base. Concrete walls, minimal electronics, biometric sensors on his wrist and temples. A camera recorded his face from the side. No weapons, no lasers, no radios, just him and one light, a single floodlight outside the bunker placed deliberately, shining across a narrow strip of ground like a stage. Dr. Keen watched from the control room with her jaw tight. "If the warning is right," she murmured, "the light isn't attraction, it's alignment." The clock hit 02:16. Nothing happened. Then 02:17. Larch's heart rate dropped, not from calm, from sudden stillness. as if his body had stopped asking questions. "Larch," the technician said into the internal system. "Status check." Larch didn't respond. His eyes were open. He was upright, but his gaze had fixed on the floodlight outside like it had become the only thing in the world. Dr. Keene leaned forward. "Cut the light," she ordered. The technician hesitated. "We need data." "Cut it," she repeated. The floodlight snapped off. For half a second, Larch blinked, confused, human again. Then the bunker cameras distorted, not static, not interference. A warping in the image, as if the lens couldn't agree on what it was seeing. And then, outside the bunker, in the strip of darkness where the light had been, a silhouette appeared. Not the object overhead, not a craft, a standing human-shaped void, edges shimmering as if made from bent air. Larch's lips moved. The audio feed captured a whisper barely there, but chilling in its familiarity. "Don't follow light." Dr. Keene's blood went cold, because the voice didn't sound like Larch. It sounded like the missing sniper. The control room went silent the moment the voice came through, not because they were shocked by sound. Military people hear chaos for a living, but because the cadence was unmistakable. The phrasing was the same. The pauses were the same. Even the strain sat in the same places, as if the sentence had been dragged through the same narrow pipe. "Don't follow light." Larch's eyes were locked on the darkness outside the bunker, his pupils wide, face slack in a way that didn't look like fear. He looked like someone listening to a lullaby only he could hear. Dr. Keene didn't blink. "That's not him," she said quietly. A technician whispered, "It's the missing sniper's voice print. 92% match." Keene's jaw tightened. "Which means it's not a message anymore," she replied. "It's a tool." Command leaned forward. "Explain." Keene pointed at the waveform on the screen. "The voice is acting like a cognitive key. It's not trying to communicate content. It's trying to trigger compliance, like a familiar knock on the door." A colonel frowned. "Why would a voice do that?" Keene's eyes stayed on Larch. "Because trained soldiers are conditioned to respond to authoritative cues. A known voice, a known cadence. Your nervous system treats it as safe enough to approach." The commander's face hardened. "So it's bait," Keene nodded once, "and it's using the sniper's identity as the hook." Outside the bunker, the human-shaped distortion held position, perfectly still, as if it understood that stillness creates gravity. The cameras couldn't resolve details, but the edge shimmer suggested something actively maintaining the shape rather than simply appearing. Larch's lips moved again. This time, his mic picked up a whisper that sounded like his mouth was borrowing someone else's language. "Come closer," he murmured. A technician flinched. "That wasn't in the earlier audio." Keene's stomach sank. "Because this isn't him remembering. It's it adapting." Command barked, "Extract him." Two soldiers in the adjacent corridor sprinted toward the bunker door. Keene slammed her palm on the table. "No, don't approach the threshold." The commander snapped, "He's our man." Keene's voice sharpened. "And if you walk into that corridor, you're giving it new biometrics to learn. It wants proximity. It wants you to move in predictable ways." The commander hesitated, one breath, one heartbeat, then ordered, "Remote lockdown, seal the corridor." Steel shutters dropped. Doors snapped shut. The bunker became a box inside a box. Larch stayed seated, eyes still fixed on the strip of darkness like the floodlight had never been cut. Then the distortion outside the bunker shifted, not forward, sideways. It slid across the ground without crossing space, like the world itself was being edited around it. The cameras tracked, but the movement didn't match their frame rate. It looked like the distortion chose a new position, and reality complied. A low hum filled the audio feed, not loud, but present, like a subwoofer you feel more than hear. Keene leaned in, voice controlled. "It's aligning with the bunker door." The commander's throat tightened. "It can't get in." "It's a reinforced structure." Keene didn't look convinced. Reinforced against what? The hum deepened for half a second, then stopped abruptly. Every screen in the control room flickered, and Larch spoke in a voice that wasn't his. "Hello," the voice said. Not a greeting, a test. Keen's eyes locked on the waveform. The syllable shape was wrong, too clean, too symmetrical, as if something had learned how to form the sound, but not how to carry the intent. Then in a whisper under the hello, another layer leaked through, thin, strained, human. "Don't!" Keen's hands curled into fists. The missing sniper was still in there, not as a hostage in a cell, as an echo being used. Command whispered, "Can we cut power?" Keen shook her head. "Power isn't the issue. Attention is." In the secure, protective custody facility, the sniper's wife sat on a narrow bed with her phone in her lap, refusing to surrender it despite 3 polite requests and 1 not-so-polite directive. At 02:17 a.m. local time, the phone lit up. No number, no caller ID, just incoming. Her throat went dry. She answered without hesitation. "Talk to me," she said. Breathing filled the line again, and her hands trembled because it was the same measured rhythm, the one she could identify blindfolded. Then the voice arrived, layered with that same thin distortion. "Do you remember?" The lake, her breath caught. The lake. A specific place, a private memory, summer training near water, a cheap cabin, a joke about fish and how he hated stillness when he wasn't the one choosing it. She forced her voice steady. "Yes." Silence. Then softly, "They can hear you when you're afraid." Her scalp prickled. "Who can?" The line crackled, and the voice shifted, becoming smoother, colder, almost curious. "Say your name," it said. Her stomach turned. "No." A pause, like consideration. Then the human layer returned, urgent, weak. "Don't say names." She pressed the phone to her ear, whispering, "I'm here. Tell me where you are." The sound on the line changed, as if something moved closer to whatever he was using to speak. "Not a place," the human layer rasped. "A pattern." She blinked hard. "What pattern?" The voice struggled, words breaking like ice under weight. "Light makes a doorway." Her chest tightened. "The light is how it takes you. Light is how it finds you," he whispered. The cold layer returned immediately, cutting through the human one with unsettling smoothness. "Where are you watching from?" it asked. It was the exact phrasing NATO had been monitoring in the bunker seconds earlier. Different context, same structure. Keen's eyes snapped to a technician in the control room as the transcript from the wife's call hit their secure feed in real time. "It's mirroring questions," Keen said. "It's harvesting location responses. It wants to map human behavior to geography." Command's face hardened. "So it's building a search algorithm out of people." Keen's voice went lower. "Or building a lure." On the bunker camera, the distortion outside the door sharpened again. Larch's body trembled as if his nervous system were being tuned, and then the voice, missing sniper's voice, weaponized, spoke with a calm that wasn't calm. "Open the door," it said. A technician whispered, "It can't. It needs consent." Keen's eyes narrowed. "Not consent," she corrected. "Compliance." Command looked at her. "What do we do?" Keen stared at the waveform, at the pattern of bait and response, and reached the conclusion that terrified her more than the silhouette. "We've been treating this like a broadcast," she said. "It's not." She turned to the room. "It's interactive. It learns faster when we stay silent, because silence forces our people to fill the gap." The commander's voice tightened. "Protocol says no verbal engagement." Keen nodded. "Protocol assumes the unknown can't use our own voices against us." She leaned closer to the mic linked to the bunker's internal system. If she spoke, she could become part of its pattern. If she stayed silent, it would keep using the sniper's voice to pull more people toward the door. Keen inhaled once, slow, deliberate, making her own physiology stable. Then she broke the rule NATO had written in panic. She spoke back, but not with language it could copy easily. She used structure, a rhythmic sequence, 3 tones, pause, 2 tones, pause, 1 tone, an intentional no encoded like a lock. The control room held its breath. Outside the bunker, the distortion stopped moving. Larch blinked, once, twice, as if the spell had loosened. And in the audio feed, buried under the hum, a thin human whisper slipped through, so faint it almost wasn't there. "Thank!" Keen's eyes hardened, because that whisper proved the most dangerous truth of all. He wasn't just missing. He was still fighting, and now NATO had to decide what was worse, leaving him there, or giving the thing in the dark more of their voices to learn. Keen's tone sequence didn't solve anything. It interrupted something, like slamming a door on a hand that had been quietly reaching into the room for hours. In the bunker feed, Larch's eyes finally moved away from the darkness. His breathing hitched once, then stabilized. He looked down at his hands as if noticing them for the first time. "What happened?" he whispered. The control room didn't answer him, because outside the bunker door, the distortion hadn't vanished. It had paused, perfectly still, as if listening to the tone the way a predator listens to a twig snap in a forest. And that stillness felt intelligent. Keen replayed the audio in her headset. Her own tones, the pause pattern, the precise spacing. She wasn't proud. She was terrified. Because the moment she spoke, the unknown stopped acting like it was improvising. It acted like it had found a new input worth studying. Command pulled the plug on the decoy experiment immediately. They initiated a full facility blackout protocol. No exterior lights, no floodlights, no motion beams, no reflective surfaces near windows. They didn't call it superstition. They called it signature reduction. Larch was extracted through an interior corridor with blackout curtains and no electronics within 5 meters of his path. A medic wrapped him in a thermal blanket, like he'd survived hypothermia. In a way, he had. When Keen finally entered the med bay, Larch looked up at her with blank fear. "I heard someone I've never met," he said, "but I knew him." Keen didn't lie. "They were using a voice you're trained to trust," she replied. Larch's jaw tightened. Was it a trick? Keen hesitated, because the truth was worse than a trick. "It was a method," she said. Larch swallowed hard. "Did I almost open the door?" Keen nodded once. "Yes." His face drained. "Why did it feel like it would be fine?" Keen's voice stayed flat. "Because it doesn't pull you with force. It pulls you with certainty." That sentence moved through the room like cold air. Command reconvened in a smaller conference space, with no screens facing windows. They had already learned that visibility, being visible, felt like feeding something. A general slid a folder across the table. "We have to end the civilian contact," he said. "The wife becomes a liability." Keen didn't react. "She's also our only proof that the channel isn't limited to the ridge." An admiral spoke quietly. "If it can call a civilian anywhere, it can call soldiers anywhere." The room tightened at that, because military doctrine is built around geography, borders, control zones, perimeters. This didn't respect perimeters. An intelligence officer cleared his throat. "We have a second anomaly," he said. "Different region, similar signature, same time window." Keen's eyes narrowed. "Location?" 200 miles away, the officer replied, "near a civilian highway. Witnesses reported a hovering light above the tree line. One person claims they heard a voice through their car radio, telling them to pull over." Keen felt her stomach drop. Light lure, voice lure, compliance. It wasn't a single incident anymore. It was a pattern spreading. The general turned to Keen. "Your tones worked," he said. "Can we scale them? Can we block it?" Keen exhaled slowly. "We didn't block it," she said. "We disrupted it in a controlled environment." It paused to analyze. "That's not a win, that's a negotiation opening." The admiral's gaze hardened. "Then negotiate." Keen shook her head. "Negotiation assumes shared constraints." Then what do we do? The general demanded. Keane looked down at her notes, something she rarely did, not because she needed them, but because she needed a second to choose the sentence that wouldn't get her shut down. We build a rescue plan that doesn't look like a rescue, she said. The room went still. Keane continued. The unknown is mapping predictable responses. It uses light because humans move toward light. It uses familiar voice because humans obey familiar authority. So we do the opposite. The Admiral leaned forward. Meaning? Keane's eyes were sharp. No lights, no verbal commands, no pursuit. We set an absence, a dead space, a corridor with nothing to latch onto. The general scoffed. We can't operate blind. Keane didn't blink. Then we lose. That got through. They drafted an operation with the strangest checklist anyone in that room had ever signed off on. No active night vision, only passive thermal with internal shielding, no laser rangefinders, no visible illumination, not even cigarette embers, no spoken communication in the field, hand signals only, no names, no call signs, no identifiers the unknown could mirror, no direct approach to any silhouette, only perimeter stabilization. Primary objective: retrieve physical evidence of transit that confirms a path. Secondary objective: attempt to stabilize the channel long enough to allow a human message through without providing new patterns. And then came the hardest line. The wife would be informed, not managed, not contained, informed. Because if the missing sniper could still reach her, she wasn't just a witness. She was an endpoint the unknown kept testing. And for NATO, that meant one thing. She was either the key that helped them understand how to shut the door, or the key that helped the door open wider. Keane visited the wife that night. No suit, no soft voice, no fake empathy, just facts. The wife sat in the small room they'd given her, phone still in her lap, eyes tired but unbroken. She looked up and immediately sensed that this woman wasn't there to comfort her. "You're the one," the wife said. "The one they're afraid of." Keane didn't deny it. "You received contact," she said, "more than once." The wife's grip tightened on the phone. That was him. Keane's voice stayed careful. Part of him. The wife's eyes flashed. "Don't you dare reduce him." Keane held her gaze. "I'm not reducing him. I'm telling you what you're up against." The wife leaned forward. "Then tell me." Keane spoke quietly, each word placed like a chess piece. "The voice you hear is being used. The questions it asks, your name, your location, those are not curiosity, those are data collection." The wife stared at her. "So you want me to stop answering?" Keane nodded. "Yes." The wife's voice turned sharp. "Then how will he talk to me?" Keane's throat tightened. "He may not be able to." Silence hit like a blow. The wife's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "You're asking me to abandon him." Keane shook her head. "I'm asking you to stop feeding the thing that's holding him." The wife whispered, "And if he calls again?" Keane didn't flinch. "Then you listen," she said. "But you do not answer with your name. You do not answer with location. You do not answer with fear." The wife's jaw trembled. "That's easy for you to say." Keane's voice lowered. "No, it isn't. But it's the only way to keep the channel human." The wife sat back, staring at her phone like it was a loaded weapon. "They'll punish him," she said, "if I don't respond." Keane hesitated, then said the truth she hated. "They might." The wife swallowed hard. "So what do I do?" Keane leaned closer. "If it asks where, you answer with a tone," she said. "Not words. I'll teach you a sequence, a refusal that doesn't reveal anything." The wife stared at her. "You want me to speak in code to something that lives in the dark?" Keane nodded. "Yes." The wife's lips parted, a bitter half-laugh escaping. "My husband gets taken by a light in a forest, and now NATO wants me to learn music." Keane didn't smile. "Not music," she corrected. "Locks." The wife's eyes hardened. "And you think you can bring him back?" Keane didn't promise. She couldn't. "I think," Keane said, "that he's still trying to warn us, and I refuse to treat that as useless." The wife looked down at the phone again. Then she nodded once. Small, furious, brave. "Teach me," she said. And in that room, with no windows and no sunlight, NATO's entire plan quietly shifted, because the next time the unknown called, it wouldn't be calling a grieving wife. It would be calling a woman trained to refuse. A woman who might become the first civilian in history to hold a line against something that didn't need weapons to win. The rescue team entered the corridor without light. That was the rule that frightened them most. Not darkness, but the discipline required to trust it. Soldiers are trained to illuminate, to reveal, to dominate terrain by forcing it into visibility. Here, visibility was the enemy. They moved at 02:13 a.m., 3 minutes before the original time window. No headlamps, no night vision, no active sensors. Their equipment was stripped down to inert materials and insulated components that would not reflect, emit, or respond. Even their breathing was paced, slow, uniform, because irregular rhythm had begun to look like a signal. Doctor. Keen monitored from a hardened station miles away, watching only indirect indicators. Pressure variance, thermal drift, clock coherence. She could not see them. That was intentional. The corridor, identified by overlapping anomalies from prior events, felt wrong even without visuals. The air had weight, not thickness, but resistance, as if movement required negotiation. The team halted at the perimeter. No silhouettes appeared, no lights. For a moment, it felt like success. Then the clocks began to argue, wrist timers desynced by milliseconds, not enough to alarm a civilian, but enough to make trained operators uneasy. One soldier raised a hand, the signal to freeze. The pressure increased, not forceful, insistent, like something leaning in to listen. At the same instant, in the secure facility hundreds of miles away, the sniper's wife felt her phone vibrate in her palm. She had been waiting for it. Not hoping, waiting. She did not look at the screen. She lifted the phone to her ear and listened. Breathing, measured, familiar, but beneath it a second cadence pulsed, too even, too precise, like a machine imitating lungs. The voice arrived layered, strained, and heartbreakingly human. "I can see edges," it said. "They're wrong." Her throat tightened. She wanted to say his name. The urge was physical, like stopping a fall by reaching for air. She remembered Keen's tones. She did not answer with words. She tapped the sequence softly against the phone casing. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, pause, 1 tap. A refusal. On the ridge, the rescue team felt the corridor react, not violently, confused. Thermal drift spiked and then collapsed. The pressure wavered, like a hand hesitating. The voice on the phone changed. The smooth layer slipped forward. "Say it," it asked. "We need alignment." The wife's jaw clenched. She tapped the sequence again, steady, unafraid. The human layer surged back through the distortion, urgent now. "Don't give names," it warned. "It copies what fits." Tears burned her eyes. She didn't wipe them. She tapped again. On the ridge, the team advanced 1 step, only one, not toward anything visible, but into a pocket where the air felt thin, like the world had forgotten to finish rendering. One soldier knelt and placed a small, inert marker on the ground. It wasn't a beacon. It didn't emit. It simply was. The pressure surged. A shape formed, not a silhouette this time, but an absence shaped like equipment should be. The thermal feed registered a void where heat should exist, contoured like something holding weight without mass. The team did not approach. They waited. The void shifted, then stabilized, hovering inches above the marker. In the control station, Keen leaned forward. "It's anchoring," she said quietly. "It needs reference." The wife's phone crackled again. The voice was quieter now, weaker. "I'm still me," it said, "but not alone." Her chest shook. She tapped the sequence, then added one new element, something Keen had warned her not to improvise, but which felt necessary now. A pause, a longer one, then a single tap. On the ridge, the void collapsed inward. not exploding, folding. The team felt a sudden absence of pressure, like a held breath released. The air snapped back into agreement with itself, and something dropped. Not a body, an object. It landed softly in the snow, leaving no impact crater, just an impression, shallow and exact. The team leader raised a hand. No one moved. The object lay there, inert, ordinary in the way that terrified them most. A helmet, NATO issue, serial matched, interior padding intact, no damage. But inside the helmet, the thermal sensors registered something impossible. Residual warmth, not fading like heat dissipates, but cycling, as if the object remembered being worn. The voice on the phone whispered one last sentence, thinner than before. "Tell her stop watching lights." The wife's breath caught. "I love you," she whispered before she could stop herself. The smooth layer surged instantly. "We love patterns too," it said. The line went dead. On the ridge, the void vanished completely. No shimmer, no distortion, just forest, snow, silence. The team waited 30 seconds, then 60. Nothing returned. They extracted immediately. The helmet was sealed in triple containment and transported under blackout conditions. No one spoke until they were airborne. Back at the facility, Keane examined the helmet in silence. She didn't need instruments to tell her what it represented. The unknown had released something. Not the man. A boundary. It had given them a warning wrapped in an object they would understand. She turned to command. "It's telling us where the line is," she said. "And what happens if we cross it?" The Admiral asked the question that hung over the room like a storm. "Can we get him back?" Keane stared at the helmet. "Not the way you bring back prisoners," she said. "Only the way you bring back people who are already halfway gone." In the quiet room, the helmet sat between them. Ordinary, familiar, devastating. Because it proved the worst and the best truth at the same time. The sniper was still fighting. But whatever held him was no longer content to hide. It was negotiating, and next time it wouldn't drop equipment. It would demand a choice. The helmet didn't look like a miracle. It looked like inventory. Scuffed matte finish, NATO stencil, foam padding that held the shape of a human head like a ghost of routine. The kind of object that usually means mission ended or someone didn't make it back. But when Keane's team placed it under shielded sensors, the helmet behaved like it still belonged to a living body. Not heat, rhythm. The interior warmth didn't decay naturally. It pulsed. Subtle rises and falls that matched a respiratory cadence with clinical precision. Not enough to be breath, just enough to resemble the idea of breath. Then the data specialists found the more disturbing layer, micro-variations in electromagnetic residue along the rim, arranged in repeating intervals, like a signal that had been pressed into the material instead of transmitted through air. They mapped it. They graphed it, and a pattern emerged that made every person in the lab go quiet. It wasn't random interference, it was timing data. Timestamps compressed into residue, pointing to the same nightly window over and over, 02.16 to 02.18. The moment the corridor thinned, the moment the voice appeared, the moment the lure became active. Keane leaned over the printout as if leaning closer could make it less true. "They're using him as a clock," she said. The Admiral frowned. "Explain." Keane tapped the page. "Not a hostage, not a prisoner, a calibration device. His physiology is stable. His neural patterns are consistent. They're using him to keep their interactions synchronized with our reality." The room tightened. A general exhaled slowly. "So when we feel the clocks desync," Keane nodded, "that's the seam. He's inside the seam." The commander from the retrieval unit spoke next, voice hard. "Then we pull him out." Keane didn't blink. "You don't pull someone out of a seam," she said. "You either widen it or you collapse it." "Widen it," the general snapped. Keane's eyes cut to him. "And you widen it with what?" The general's face hardened. "Light." Silence. Because everyone in the room understood the trade. Light was how they saw and how it found. Light wasn't a tool anymore. It was an invitation. The Admiral folded his hands. "We have a civilian channel," he said, glancing toward the file on the wife. "You think the wife is the lever?" Keen didn't like that phrasing. It treated her like equipment. "She's the only endpoint it keeps returning to," Keen corrected. "That means she's either a threat or a doorway." The General's tone sharpened. "Then we shut her down." Keen's jaw tightened. "We can't. It's already inside the infrastructure. We can only control what she gives it." The Admiral stared at the helmet again. "And what did she give it last time?" Keen's voice went low. "A sentence." The room went colder, because in that phone call, when the wife whispered, "I love you," the unknown answered, "We love patterns too." That wasn't just a creepy line. It was a confession. It wasn't feeding on emotion like folklore. It was feeding on structure, names, places, predictable language, human reflexes, anything that could be used to map a mind into a usable key. Keen opened a second file, audio analysis from every contact so far. She played a segment through the lab speakers, the husband's cadence, then the smooth layers cadence. You could hear the difference if you knew what to listen for. The husband's voice carried imperfection, tiny hesitations, breath that didn't match the sentence, strain that made the words uneven. The smooth layer didn't breathe like a man. It breathed like a simulation. Keen paused the audio and looked around the room. "It's learning faster than we can contain it," she said, "and it learns best when we respond in language." The General crossed his arms. "So we don't speak. We use tones." Keen shook her head. "Tones work until it learns the tones. It will. It already pauses to analyze. The more consistent we are, the more predictable we become." The Admiral's gaze sharpened. "So what are you proposing?" Keen hated the answer because it took the one thing NATO valued, control, and replaced it with a risk no one could fully model. "We give it a message designed to break mimicry," she said. The General scoffed. "What does that even mean?" Keen leaned forward. "We speak, but we speak in a way it can't reuse," she said. "No names, no locations, no emotional phrases, no questions it can mirror. We deliver a single directive that changes the interaction." The commander frowned. "Like what?" Keen's eyes flicked to the helmet, then back. "A boundary statement," she said, "and a demand." The Admiral's face tightened. "We don't demand things from unknowns." Keen's voice stayed steady. "Then we keep reacting, and reaction is how it trains us." A long silence followed. Then the Admiral asked the question that mattered. "How do we deliver it?" Keen didn't answer immediately, because the only delivery mechanism that had been proven to penetrate the seam without lights, without proximity, was the wife. The wife who wasn't trained for this. The wife who had already been psychologically invaded by grief, now being asked to become an instrument of containment. Keen stood, gathered her notes, and left the room before she could be ordered to make it more palatable. When she entered the wife's quarters, she found her sitting upright, phone in her lap, eyes fixed on the wall, as if the wall might change. Keen didn't sit down. She didn't soften her voice. "The helmet came back," Keen said. The wife's head snapped toward her. "That means he's alive." Keen inhaled. "It means he's present." The wife's jaw tightened. "Stop talking like he's a weather report." Keen met her gaze. "He's being used." Silence. Then the wife's voice went sharp. "Used how?" Keen placed a printout on the table. Nothing technical, just a simple timeline with the 0216 window circled again and again. "He's acting like a synchronization point," Keen said. "Every time it opens the seam, his pattern stabilizes it." The wife stared at the paper, then whispered, "So he's holding it open." Keen nodded once. The wife's face tightened, anger and horror mixing into something that looked like resolve, trying to survive. "You're going to ask me to do something," she said. Keen didn't dodge. Yes. The wife's fingers tightened around the phone. You want me to answer again? I want you to speak, Keen corrected. The wife's eyes flashed. You told me not to. Keen's voice stayed calm. Not the way you did before, she said. No names. No, I love you. No questions. No location. No fear. The wife stared at her. Then what do I say? Keen leaned in slightly and lowered her voice, as if even the room could listen. You tell it this. No more mimicry. No more lures. Return the human pattern intact. She paused. And then you stop. The wife's throat bobbed. And if it asks where I am? Keen didn't blink. You don't answer. And if it uses his voice again? Keen's expression hardened. You don't chase it. The wife's eyes filled, but she refused to blink away the tears. You're asking me to talk to the thing holding my husband, she whispered, and not react like a human being. Keen nodded once. I'm asking you to behave like a lock. The wife's hands trembled. She looked down at the phone, then up at Keen. If I do this, she said quietly, and it punishes him. Keen didn't offer comfort she couldn't guarantee. Instead, she gave the only truth she had. If you do nothing, Keen said, it will keep using him until he becomes perfect. The wife swallowed hard, then nodded, slow, deliberate, like a person stepping into deep water without knowing how cold it is. Okay, she said. I'll do it. Keen's stomach tightened because she knew what that meant. The next call wouldn't be accidental contact. It would be a deliberate confrontation. And in that confrontation, NATO would learn whether the seam could be negotiated or whether the only way to save the sniper was to risk opening the door wider than anyone could close. The call came the next night at 02:16 on the dot. Not 02:15, not 02:17. As if something out there wanted NATO to understand one thing very clearly. This window belongs to it. The sniper's wife had been sitting upright for an hour, phone in both hands, shoulders tight, breathing paced the way Keen taught her, steady, uninteresting, non-reactive. She had taped a small note to the back of the phone. No names, no where, no fear. When the screen lit up, incoming with no number, her stomach dropped anyway. She answered. Breathing filled the line. For 2 seconds it sounded like him, measured, familiar. Then the smooth layer slid over it, clean and emotionless. Say your location, it requested. The wife closed her eyes for half a beat, then opened them again. She did not answer the question. She delivered Keen's boundary message exactly as instructed. No extra syllables, no tremor. No more mimicry, no more lures. Return the human pattern intact. Silence. Not dead air silence. Listening silence. Then a faint distortion rose, like the sound of a radio being tuned between stations. The smooth layer spoke again, slightly altered, as if it had adjusted its tone to match hers. We cannot return what you keep naming, it said. Her throat tightened. She almost asked what that meant. She didn't. She stayed still. The human layer pushed through, ragged, strained, unmistakably him. Don't talk long. Her eyes burned. She swallowed the urge to say his name. Then the smooth layer returned, colder. Exchange. One word. It landed like a weight. The wife's fingers went numb around the phone. No, she said before she could stop herself. One syllable, human, absolute. The line crackled softly, like amusement without laughter. Exchange, it repeated. Then, light. The wife's chest tightened. She understood the implication instantly. The thing wasn't asking for money or information the way humans would. It was asking for alignment, for a doorway. For the very rule NATO had built its entire plan around, no light. The human layer surged again, urgent, pleading, don't give light. The wife's voice trembled, but she held it inside the smallest shape possible. I won't, she whispered. The smooth layer interrupted her. Then no return. The line went dead. She sat frozen, phone pressed to her ear long after silence, as if her stillness could keep him tethered. Then she did the one thing Keane told her she'd have to do if the call ended. She did not cry. She did not spiral. She stood up, walked to the security phone in the hallway, and said one sentence with a voice like steel. It asked for an exchange. Within minutes, Keane was in the room. The wife didn't wait for reassurance. It wants light, she said. It said exchange, and then light. And he warned me not to give it. Keane's expression tightened. She had hoped for many outcomes. This was the one she feared most, because it confirmed the unknown wasn't just reacting. It was negotiating terms. Keane took a breath. Did it ask for location? Yes, the wife said. I didn't answer. Keane nodded once, approval without comfort. Good. It also said, the wife continued, voice sharp with focus, that it can't return what I keep naming. Keane's eyes narrowed, meaning it's mapping identity through language. The wife's jaw clenched, meaning it's using his voice to make me say his name. Keane nodded. Yes. The wife's eyes flashed. So if I say his name, I make him easier to copy. Keane didn't lie. Yes. Silence hit the room. Then the wife said quietly, it threatened to keep him if we don't give it light. Keane's gaze hardened. That's not a threat, she said. That's a test. It wants to see if we'll break our own rule under pressure. At command, the report detonated the debate instantly. A general slammed a folder on the table. We cannot give it anything, he snapped. No light, no exchange. End contact. An admiral's voice was low and dangerous. You think we're controlling contact? It called a civilian on demand. It brought back a helmet. It can shape the corridor. We're not choosing if it interacts. We're choosing how. Another officer muttered. If we don't give light, we lose him. Keane's jaw tightened. If we do give light, she countered, we may lose more than him. The commander from the retrieval unit leaned forward. We can use controlled light, he insisted. Shielded, narrow spectrum. Time. Keane shook her head. Light is not just visibility to it, she said. It's geometry. It's alignment. It's the thing that makes the seam easier to open. The general pointed at her. Then what do you propose? We do nothing? Keane stared at the room. We do something harder, she said. We offer a substitute. A substitute for light? The commander scoffed. Keane nodded. We offer structure without illumination. A controlled field, non-visual. A sealed rhythm, something it can lock onto that doesn't widen the seam. They looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Keane continued anyway. If it wants an exchange, we give it an exchange it can't exploit. The admiral's eyes narrowed. Such as? Keane slid a sheet across the table, an audio grid, tone sequences, timed pulses, and a very specific instruction, a tone bridge, designed to stabilize contact for exactly 10 seconds without using light, language, or location. 10 seconds. A tiny window, but enough for one thing. A single human sentence, short, structured, and non-identifying, passed through while the wife stayed silent afterward. The general's voice was tight. You're still engaging it. Keane's response was calm. We already are, she said. Silence is engagement when it's harvesting our instincts. The admiral stared at the plan. If it refuses, Keane held his gaze. Then we learn it wasn't bargaining, she said. It was hunting. The room went colder. Because that was the real fork in the road. Negotiation meant rules. Hunting meant there were none. They approved Keane's plan with reluctant signatures, and that night, at 02:15, the wife sat again with her phone and a small metronome device Keane had placed beside her, silent, inert, until it was time. When the call came, she answered, breathing, smooth layer. Then the same word, as if it enjoyed repetition. Exchange. The wife did not speak. Keane's device began to pulse, a sequence of tones transmitted through the phone's microphone in a pattern too precise to be mistaken for emotion, too alien to be easily mirrored back into a human voice. The line went silent. Then the smooth layer returned, slower now. "Accepted," it said. The wife's blood ran cold because for the first time it wasn't testing, it was agreeing. Then in the last second before the tone bridge ended, the human layer surged through like a drowning man, breaking the surface. One sentence. Broken, urgent, terrifyingly clear. "Tell them, the light isn't a door, it's a net." The bridge ended. The line went dead. The wife sat shaking, not from fear, from the realization that her husband had just given NATO the most important intelligence they'd received since the first shot. And now they had to face what that sentence meant. They'd been thinking light was how the seam opens, but the sniper was telling them something worse. Light wasn't an entrance. It was a trap designed to catch whatever tried to come back. And if NATO turned on the light to get him home, they might be the ones sealing his fate forever. The operation was officially closed 12 days later. No recovery, no confirmation of survival, no public acknowledgement that anything unusual had occurred. The sniper was listed as missing during classified activity, his name removed from rotational logs, his service record sealed, his widow given a folded flag, and a silence that felt heavier than grief. But inside NATO, nothing returned to normal. Light-based reconnaissance protocols were quietly rewritten. Certain frequencies were blacklisted without explanation. Units operating in forested or maritime zones were issued a new directive buried deep inside procedural language. Do not pursue unidentified aerial anomalies under low-light conditions. No reason given. The helmet was stored in a facility that doesn't officially exist. It still cycles warmth, not fading, not increasing, just waiting. Dr. Keene resigned 3 weeks later. Not fired, not reassigned. She left because she understood something the institution could not afford to say out loud. They had not lost a soldier to an enemy. They had interrupted a system that existed before borders, before doctrine, before radar, and that system had noticed. The sniper's wife moved away. No forwarding address, no public statements. The phone that once rang at 0216 now sits powered off in a drawer. It has not rung again. Some analysts believe the boundary held. Others believe the unknown simply learned enough. And a few, those who replay the final audio over and over, can't ignore one detail. In the moment the tone bridge collapsed, just before silence, there was a sound beneath the static. Not speech, not breathing, something like disappointment. If the sniper is still alive, he exists somewhere between definitions, neither captive nor free. And if the unknown ever decides to renegotiate, it now understands the most dangerous truth of all. Humans will break their own rules to save one of their own. And next time, it may not ask for light.